Well, welcome to another installment of Garden Party, everybody. This is our virtual series from the Southern California News Group that we created to give you tips, tricks, and insights into getting the most joy and productivity out of your gardening experience, and also help you find a community of like-minded green thumbs, or in my case, a wannabe green thumb. I'm Sam Dunn. I'm the senior editor for premium content here at the Southern California News Group. And before we get rolling, I have to say thank you to our Reader Reward subscribers and really to all of you for supporting our virtual programs. We wouldn't be here without you. By the way, if you are a Reader Reward subscriber attending today, you're automatically entered to win a $100 gift certificate to Home Depot to help you with your gardening goals. And listen, real talk, if you're not a subscriber to one of our publications, why not? Please support local journalism. Go to scng.com/subscribe to find your local paper, and please join us as a regular reader. Before we get started with our columnists, let me remind you of a few things. If you have questions, and we hope you do, use the Q&A feature on the Zoom toolbar there on the bottom of your screen. Questions will be addressed at the end of the presentation, but certainly if you want to make comments during the presentation, use the chat feature found on your Zoom toolbar as well. If you put questions in the chat, we might not see them, so be sure to use that Q&A feature. Also, keep in mind you'll have slides to refer to as we go, and you're not going to miss a thing because this session is videotaped, and a link will be sent to you so you can share or just revisit some of your favorite moments. It's also posted at scng.com/virtual events, and that's where you can find all of our past virtual shows, as well as see what's coming up. Now it's my extreme pleasure to introduce one of our longtime gardening columnists, Laura Simpson, with today's presentation. Laura, take it away.
All right. Okay, I'm gonna share my screen so you can see my pretty pictures. All righty, can everyone see that?
Looks good.
Yep, looks good.
Okay, just want to make sure I didn't click on the wrong presentation or something. Okay, so today we're going to talk about preserving the harvest. We're getting to the end of our major growing season in the summer, and a lot of times you end up with an awful lot of vegetables, herbs, just like a whole lot of stuff kind of piling up, and you want to maybe preserve it to save through the winter time. So this is some of the things you can do that you may not have thought of to, instead of like dropping a bag of zucchini off at on your neighbor's porch or whatever, there's some other more creative things you can do with your harvest. So what can you preserve? You can preserve flowers, herbs, fruits, and vegetables. And, I'll go through each one of those, what you can do. So with flowers, depending on what you have, if you have edible varieties of flowers, which would include things like roses, violets, nasturtiums, pansies, sometimes calendulas, things like that. You can do things like candy them, make flavored sugars, garnishes, or even add them into jams and jellies. Non-edible ones, you're a little bit more restricted on, but you can press them and do artsy, crafty type things with those. If they smell good, you can make potpourri out of them. There's like a rose variety that I recommend. It's Cecile Brunner. It's a little tiny light pink rose, but it has a really strong scent when it's dried. And those, I really like those in sachets or potpourri. So with edible flowers, you want to make sure that you pick them at their peak when they're the prettiest, especially if you're going to use them for something like this. Make sure that they haven't been treated with pesticides, even organic, so-called safe pesticides. You want to avoid that. But also make sure there's no pests or hitchhikers on there. It kind of detracts from the pretty, the pretty tray of cookies if there's like a worm crawling out under there or aphids. So make sure that you rinsed them off and made sure there's nobody hitching a ride. Also be aware of allergies. A lot of people have allergies, particularly to chrysanthemums are a highly allergenic flower. Like if you have hay fever or asthma, you may want to avoid trying to eating anything like from this chrysanthemum family, because they do cross-react with a lot of other allergens. So you may have some crossover reactivity. So just use caution with that. You can dry flowers. To do that, you could put them in the oven, but at the lowest temperature possible. Be careful not to forget about them. You can also use a dehydrator. There's numerous electric dehydrators out there that work very well. Air drying them is also great. You can hang them upside down like this and air dry them. You want to dry them at a real low temperature, of course, because that preserves the scent and also the coloring. And you can also use like a shoebox and there's the stuff you can get desiccant. It's like the stuff that is in the little packets that comes in everything, the stuck up moisture. You can buy the big bag, I think from Amazon, and you can just put them in a container with desiccant and then close it, and then the desiccant will suck the moisture out of the flowers. You can also use that if you drop your cell phone in the toilet too. So it's a dual purpose type thing. But with the drying flowers, I want to mention this picture here where it shows them tied up with twine. It looks really nice for the photograph, but if you are going to dry flowers or stems of herbs, you're going to want to use a rubber band to tie the stems together, because as they dry, the stems get skinnier. And if you just tie them with twine, a lot of times it'll start dropping out of the bundle. So using a rubber band tight around the stems will avoid that problem. Candied flowers, which is kind of fun. You want to make sure that they're clean, of course. Dip them in egg white and then roll them in superfine sugar, it's marketed as baker's sugar, but you can save some money by just using regular granulated sugar and then running it through the food processor for about a minute or so. And that will grind up the sugar and make it super fine. And it's exactly the same thing, except it's cheaper. So but you roll it in a super fine sugar, because then it coats it and preserves the shape. And then dry it on parchment paper, or wax paper, or here it says on a rack, which is a good idea too. And then you want to store it in a dry, dark place. These are delicate, so there's something you can like stick on a cake or cupcakes or something. It's real pretty. And violets actually have an interesting flavor. Just don't overdo it. They tend to get kind of bitter if you use too much. Flavored sugar. This is another big favorite of mine. One of the things you can do is save fancy jars and make flavored sugar. This is a project you can do in October, and then you can give it away for Christmas in fancy little jars. So I like to use like a quart jar and then layer sugar and flower petals, or sugar and zest, lemon zest or herbs. Just a scoop of sugar, a handful of the herbs, a scoop of sugar, a handful of herbs, and then just put it in the cabinet and let it do its thing. And it'll flavor the sugar. The sugar will absorb the oils. Make sure that it's dried completely. Sugar is what we call hygroscopic, which means absorbs water readily. And you notice this if you stick a wet spoon into your sugar bowl, and within a day, you've got a sugar iceberg. You've got clumps of sugar in there. That's because that sugar has absorbed any moisture that was on that spoon, and it clumps together. So you want to make sure that this is dry, that there's no water in there. Then you can blend it, or like I said, layer it, store it in an airtight container. I like keeping it in the dark and just letting it do its thing for about a month or so. And then by then the sugar's flavored, and you can stir it up and put it in fancy jars and give it away. Let's see, jams and jellies, another thing too. You can, if you have a jam or a jelly recipe that you you like, and you want to use like, I as a master food preserver, I have to say you should use tested recipes, things from like the Ball Company or a National Center for Home Food Preservation, any of these reputable sources for safe recipes. But with that being said, you can tweak the recipe a little bit and it'll still be safe. So things like adding a few violet petals to, say, plum jelly or apple jelly. Apple jelly is a good one to add because it's kind of a blank slate. Plum jelly can be a little bit stronger, but you could use just a little bit of either fresh or dried flowers or herbs. And I've used lavender, rose, and violets for this. Just use it sparingly. Like I said before, it does tend to get bitter if you use too much of it. And let's see. So with herbs, I've got a couple of basil plants. They're about 4 feet tall, and so I have this dilemma right now: what to do with herbs. You can dry them. You can make pesto, herb mixes, vinegars, flavored syrup, and flavored oil. And so, how do you do those? Drying herbs. And once again, make sure it's pesticide free. Make sure that it's not something that was grown like along the sidewalk and the neighborhood dogs have been peeing on it. You know, you want to make sure you wash it really good. Pick them before flowering if you can. I know basil has a tendency to flower like all summer long, but try to pick it before flowering, because when a plant flowers, what it's doing is all the energy from that plant is going into making seeds, because it's kind of its last hurrah. It's like, oh, I'm getting ready to die, so I got to put out some seeds to propagate. So picking it before it flowers means that most of the sugars and the oils and stuff will still be in the leaves instead of, it's not going to be putting its energy into flowering. It's still putting its energy into making the aromatics. Wash it in cold water, of course. You can use a dehydrator, again, oven, air dry, like you do for flowers. You use a low temperature to keep it from, like, you don't want it to dry at a higher temperature. It seems like the aromatics will evaporate if it's dried at too high of a temperature. And then also I recommend, like, after you dry it and then you crumble it up, put it in a Ziploc baggie, label it, and then freeze it, because you never know if there's any insect eggs or things like that. Plus, it just helps preserve it a little better. But make sure you freeze it, because everything looks the same. Catnip looks the same as basil, which looks the same as mint. So just always learn from my mistakes. I've had unlabeled herbs laying around. I had no idea what they were. You can make pesto, and you can make pesto not just out of basil, but you can use cilantro, parsley. You can also use some of these stronger herbs like thyme, rosemary, sage, and oregano. If you do have like a lot of time and you want to make a pesto out of some of these stronger herbs, what you would want to do is use only a quarter of, say, your base recipe calls for basil and it calls for, say, 1 cup of basil. What you would want to do is, for rosemary, sage, oregano, thyme, any of these stronger herbs, you would want to use a 1/4 cup and then 3/4 of a cup of parsley, because these herbs are very bitter and it would be just really it would not taste very well it wouldn't taste very good if you did it straight. So that's one thing to remember, is just to cut them 1 to 4 with parsley. Parsley is your friend here. You can also make just plain parsley pesto. You can substitute parsley for the basil. You can also make cilantro pesto. Cilantro pesto is good if you add, when you're grinding it up in the food processor, if you add, say, a jalapeno pepper, chopped up jalapeno. And also, I like to throw in some pistachios with that. Instead of pine nuts that you use for basil, I would use pistachios for the cilantro pesto. And with parsley, it's just good to have like frozen cubes of these pestos around in your freezer, just because you can add them into soups and things like that. Make sure, and once again, make sure you label them. You don't want the unknown ice cubes. And I like to freeze them into ice cube trays and then pop them out into a Ziploc bag. And then you can just grab a cube and throw it into soup or let it thaw and use it to spread on bread or whatever. And I'm getting hungry talking about this. It can stay in the freezer for like a year. If you have like a chest freezer that doesn't go through a freeze thaw cycle, probably a little bit longer. You cannot can these. Okay, so don't try to process this in a hot water bath or a pressure canner. I know that you can buy jars of pesto at Costco, and Trader Joe's, I believe, has the little jars of pesto, but when the factory cans them, it's a industrial process. They do it at a much higher temperature. It's not something that we can safely can at home. It's considered a botulism risk because the oil creates an ideal environment for botulism. However, it can be safely frozen. Okay, herb mixes. You can also make your own herb mixes with Italian herbs, Italian. And I looked up what's in Italian seasoning, and I got probably several dozen different combinations of herbs. So you can kind of play with it and see how you like your Italian seasoning, but you can also make herb mixes, and that works just as well too. Herbs de Provence is a mix of herbs. It usually includes lavender. Finesse herbs a lot of times includes chervil and parsley, some of the milder flavored herbs, and then of course poultry seasoning for Thanksgiving, which is awesome. Vinegar, you can add herbs to vinegar safely. I like using either red or white wine vinegar, occasionally rice vinegar. If you use apple cider vinegar, I recommend pouring it through a coffee filter, because apple cider vinegar normally has like pieces of the mother in the bottom, the stuff that you see at the bottom, and it looks nicer if you filter it before you pour it into the pretty bottle. And I like to use the sturdier herb sprigs like thyme or basil, savory, rosemary. So all those sturdier herb sprigs, those hold up better. Something like chervil or parsley, it can kind of disintegrate in there and doesn't really look so good. And it probably still tastes nice, but it aesthetically not as pretty. And this is shelf stable. You can keep it in your pantry and use it. So it's safe that way. Syrup, you can use these for making your own sodas. I know Soda Stream's still a big thing, I think. So what you would do is you would combine 1 cup of water and 1 cup of sugar, bring it to a boil so the sugar is dissolved all the way, let it cool. And as it's cooling, you add the whatever you want to flavor the syrup with. So lavender is a real popular one. Also violets, citrus zest. And this you would want to refrigerate. Make it in a small batch because it doesn't keep that well, but it's, it keeps for maybe a week or so. So, it's kind of a fun thing to have. You can add it to drinks and stuff. Flavored oils. So this is one thing where you see this on Pinterest a lot, where people put a garlic clove into a bottle of olive oil and then put it on the shelf. This is dangerous. It's a botulism hazard. So if you do, but you can flavor oils with herbs, but make them in small batches. Don't use big bottles unless you plan on using it all up within, say, 2 weeks. It's probably good in the refrigerator for about 2 weeks. You want to use it promptly. So just use caution with that, and use the dried herbs. It's safer to use the dried herbs because that discourages bacterial growth. Any kind of moisture in there is going to is going to encourage bacterial growth that you do not want. But that definitely refrigerate. Fruit. Okay, so sometimes when you have a fruit tree, even if you have a dwarf tree, even if you thin your fruit, you end up with way too much fruit. We do. So we've done all this with our fruit. We dried it, made jams or jellies, candied it, canned it, frozen, made fruit liqueur, and salt preserving some fruit, which is pretty interesting. So drying fruit, this is a great way to deal with a massive amount of fruit, like plums. Okay, plum trees, they just produce way too much. Apples, cherries, and persimmons also dry very nicely. Berries and grapes, of course. You want to avoid the tart-skinned plums, which would be any of the Japanese plums. If you bite into it and it's like really, really sour at the skin, then you want to avoid trying to dry that. You probably peel it, but that's more work than I really want to do. So when you dry the fruit, I like to toss it with fruit fresh or crushed vitamin C tablets, either one. It's the same stuff. It's ascorbic acid. It prevents the fruit from discoloring. Do not over dry. You want it to be like chewy, but you don't want it to be like leather, basically. And conditioning. So conditioning would be like if you have a tray of fruit slices that you're drying, obviously some of the fruit's going to be a little bit more dry and other pieces are not going to be quite as dry. So what you want to do is put them in a Ziploc bag and then just every day or so, just kind of like massage it with your hands. What that does is kind of distribute the moisture. So the ones that are a little bit too dry end up kind of re-moisturizing, and the ones that are, maybe a little bit soft, then they kind of lose their moisture to the drier fruit. It kind of distributes the moisture. When you're drying fruit, you want to make sure it's dry enough so that when you pick it up and kind of like rub it in your hand, it doesn't feel slimy inside. So that you'll know when it won't feel like it's slippery inside, but you don't want it to be just really tough. It's like a sweet spot, and you'll learn as experience will tell you. Jams and jellies, of course. A lot of times, jams are that's a good way to use up fruit. Jellies use more fruit because you make them from fruit juice. So you end up processing a lot more fruit to get, say, if a recipe calls for 3 cups of fruit juice, well, you're probably going to process a lot more fruit than a jam recipe that calls for 3 cups of crushed fruit. So if you have a lot, look at some jelly recipes. They use the fruit juice. You need pectin, either powder or liquid, unless you want to do the cooking it until it gets to, I think, 220 degrees. I always end up cooking it too much and I end up with Knox blocks for jam. So I usually go with the powder or liquid pectin, and the recipe will tell you which one to use. And use slightly underripe fruit. That acidity, when you make jams and jellies, you're using an enormous amount of sugar for the most part for most recipes. So you want to use like slightly underripe fruit just because that little bit of tartness will lend the jam or jelly a little bit more character than just having it be a sweet blob on your toast, which some people might like. I don't. If you want to go with a lower sugar variety, you can use there's low sugar pectin or there's pomona pectin, which you can use for low or no sugar. Pomona pectin is good also if you want to use alternative sweeteners like honey or monk fruit, things like that. They have directions on how to use those alternative sweeteners, and the pomona pectin does not rely on the sugar to gel. You want a water bath. Process it. I see where some people say, oh, you can wash the jars and then you pour the hot jam or hot jelly in the jar, screw it, and then turn it upside down. And then it seals. Well, it hasn't been processed, so that's going to get moldy because you haven't sterilized the contents of the jar enough. So it, you know, it may not get moldy, but it's too risky. It's better to just water bath process it. Candied fruit, this is really good. Candied citrus peel, a warning, this is very addictive. I totally love candied citrus peel. I like using oranges or lemons. They're my two favorite. Oranges probably the best. Lemons are good too. You can also use grapefruit, any citrus, where you want to peel it till it peel it, but don't include that bitter white part. The pith is what it's called. So you can use like a paring knife or something. Papaya, kiwi, and pineapple also will candy very nicely. Any of these are kind of tart fruit. You'll cook it. Basically, it involves cooking it until in a heavy syrup until it like turns clear, and then like I said, it works best with tartar fruit rather than sweet fruit. And once it's done, once it turns clear, you take it out and you kind of spread it on a piece of wax paper or parchment and let it kind of dry out partly, and then you can toss it with sugar to keep the pieces separated, and it's like totally addictive, I gotta say. Okay, so canning. I could talk hours on canning, but some of the things to remember, most fruit is considered high acid for canning purposes. You want a water bath can. That's the safest way rather than the open kettle method. To can it, usually you're slicing it and then you pour light, medium, or heavy syrup over the top until it's up to, you know, a certain point near the top of the jar. You want to use fruit at its peak ripeness. You don't want to get fruit that's like starting to turn moldy or going bad or getting like wrinkled and dried up, because preserving it doesn't make it better. You want to start with something good. So, because it's a lot of work and you want your product to be worth the work. And healthycanning.com is my favorite website because they include all of the recipes on there are tested, safe recipes. It's an awesome website. It has really good explanations as to why you need to process water bath canning, what's safe to process, what's not, you know, different recipes, and just a lot of good explanations as to why we do things the way we do when we can stuff. So I recommend checking that website out. Freezing fruit. This is great for like raspberries, because we get a ton of raspberries, right? And they're very delicate. So if you have fruit that has a tendency to discolor, like peaches, they turn brown and kind of unappetizing looking. So we'll peel and slice the peaches and then toss them with fruit fresh. Freeze them on a parchment lined baking sheet, and then I seal them in either Ziploc bags or vacuum seal. And I found that freezing the fruit first and then putting it in the bag and vacuum sealing it is better, because if you try to vacuum seal the fruit when it's still wet, that moisture gets sucked into the vacuum machine and it doesn't seal. So just a helpful hint. Vacuum seal works great for berries, but for anything, it also reduces the volume. Okay, making fruit liqueurs. This is pretty crazy. You can make like limoncello, or there's like homemade, what is it? The orange liqueur, triple sec. There's all sorts of recipes online for people that want to make their own fruit liqueur. I like the citrus rinds because like when our citrus is producing, we're kind of overwhelmed. So I'll take the citrus rind, and once again, you just take a paring knife and just peel the pretty part, not the white part. And then put it in a clean jar. Just one of these with a bale wire is good, or you know, just a mason jar. Usually a pint or a quart jar is good. Then you cover it with either vodka or Everclear, which is vodka on steroids, basically. Just stick in a dark cabinet for about a month, then strain it through a coffee filter, and then mix it 50-50 with a simple syrup, and you've got limoncello. And it's really quite good. So the reason I recommend using Everclear is because if you're mixing it 50-50 with the syrup, it kind of dilutes the alcohol a little bit too much. And I want to have a little bit of alcohol in there. So the Everclear, it's getting diluted half and half. So I just love Everclear. It has the warning label on there saying if you drink this, you will die because it is so strong. So yeah, use caution. But when you're using it for this purpose, that's the best use for that. Salt preserving. So my friends from the Middle East clued me into this. The best way to preserve these Meyer lemons, which are really pretty lemons, but you cut them into quarters, rub the cut parts with kosher salt, then stuff them in a jar, and then pour the salt over top. So the salt's gonna draw out the moisture in the lemons, and it's a very good way to preserve lemons. You can store it, you screw a lid on, and then just store it in a dark cabinet. It's really tasty. Like if you're making a tagine or a number of Middle Eastern dishes call for it, you would just take a very small amount of it and chop it up fine and sprinkle it over that because it is very strong. I mean, it's very salty, but also very strong flavored, but it gives it a little bit of a zing to a lot of these dishes. So I recommend trying that out. I saw Trader Joe's actually was selling jars of salt preserved lemons at one point, and those were pretty good too, but I already had some underway, so I didn't buy them. Okay, so vegetables. You can dry them, freeze them, can them, pickle them, or ferment them. Of course, always eat them. Drying vegetables. So you've seen the chips in the, I think Costco sells the big bags of these Terra chips, and it's beets and sweet potatoes and string beans and a number of other things that are thinly sliced and supposedly dried, and they're really kind of addictive as well. But if you notice, they aren't really low in calories because they add oil to them, and of course that packs on the calories. So if you dry them yourself, then you have control over how much oil is added to it and how much salt is put in there. So it does give you some control, and you can get a lower calorie treat by making your own. Plus it's cheaper. Blanch the vegetables. That preserves the quality and also the color, so they stay pretty. And dry them until they're crisp. So don't dry them like fruit. You want to dry them until they're totally crisp. And you can also make vegetable powders with these, where you can, if they're crisp, then you can chop them up and then grind them in a food processor, and you've got a powder that if you have kids who are vegetable resistant, you can stir this into any number of things and kind of sneak some vegetables in their diet. So I didn't really have that problem too much. So my kids all like their vegetables. Okay, so freezing vegetables. One thing to remember with freezing as a process is that it doesn't make bad things good. I mean, I've been guilty of this. We go in the fridge and go, "Ooh, this is like starting to go bad. I'm going to pop it in the freezer to have later." Well, that's not going to make it like suck and eat less. So you want to freeze stuff that's in good quality, reasonably fresh. Remove the peel and stem, usually for carrots and things like that. The stem end, you want to cut those off for zucchinis and things like that. A lot of times you'll notice with certain certain vegetables that it starts to rot from the stem end, it's because it's producing an enzyme that's breaking down the plant material. And so if you chop that off, if you make your own pickles, you'll notice in the instructions it tells you to cut the ends off of the cucumbers, and that's why, because it makes the cucumbers not soften when you process them. Their blanching helps preserve the quality. It stops the enzymes. It stops the oxidation. So the oxidation causes the discoloration of vegetables. Also, vegetables have enzymes inside of them that's called autolysis, where when you cut it off a plant, okay, then it's dying, it's dead. So when that happens, the cells release these enzymes that cause like self-decomposition, basically. So it helps the vegetable break down. This is great if you're going to throw it in the compost pile, right? But if you're going to eat it, you don't want these enzymes to be working on your vegetables, and it's going to decrease the quality. It's going to make them like soft or icky. So blanching, heating it up, you drop it in a pot of boiling water for 1 minute, and then you take it out, and then you put it in ice water. That boiling water deactivates that enzyme, and so it stops that process altogether. If you don't do that and you put vegetables in the freezer and don't use them within, say, a month, you'll notice that the quality declines quite a bit because those enzymes are still working. They're not working as fast, but they're still there and they're still working. So blanching will, what we call deactivate the enzyme or denature the enzyme, and helps preserve the food that way. So that's why you do want to blanch. It is worth the trouble to blanch. Cooking greens are really good to freeze because you get a pound of kale, it's like an overflowing colander full of kale. And then if you chop it up and blanch it, it compresses it down. So you have this little like Ziploc bag that's about this thick. So you can stack those guys and you can have like 20 pounds of kale in your freezer that you can throw into soups or, cook with bacon. You're going to cook it anyway, and it's going to wilt. Might as well wilt it before you put it in the freezer. So that's a great way to compact cooking greens. And also you can vacuum seal them as well. It works really well, but do freeze it first, once again, because of the moisture getting into it interferes with the sealing process. So canning, here we go. So there's high acid and low acid vegetables. For the most part, most vegetables are going to be low acid, which means you need to use a pressure canner. High acid vegetables, things like tomatoes with salsa, any pickled foods, things like that, anything that's high acid, you can use a water bath canner. Otherwise, like green beans, potatoes, asparagus, most other vegetables, almost all the vegetables are going to be low acid, and they need to be processed in a pressure canner for safety. Then there's a difference between sealed versus safe. I hear about this all the time where, oh, the jar's sealed, so it's going to be safe to eat in 6 months. Well, no, not necessarily. The whole process is you boil them in the canner to sterilize the contents of the jar. You don't want any bacteria or organisms living in that jar at all. And then sealing it makes sure that no additional bacteria get in. But the fact that something is sealed does not necessarily or automatically mean that it's safe. It has to be processed for prescribed time. That's why you want to use the tested safe recipes for that. And the safe recipe sources are not going to be Pinterest or Facebook. You want to go with cooperative extension websites, master food preserver websites, Ball or Kerr, they do their own testing of recipes, and the healthycanning.com, they have all safe recipes from different sources, including some Canadian sources too. It's really important to go with those tested recipes because they it's a long process, but they make sure that when they tell you to cut things, a certain way, a certain size, and then, to only use like this size jar and boil it for this amount of time, they've tested it to make sure that nothing is going to survive that process. So it's definitely worth going with those tested recipes. So pressure canning. A lot of people confuse pressure cookers with pressure canners. I saw the Instant Pot, when they first came out, they advertised that you could can in them, which is not true. And I think they dropped that off of their packaging. But pressure canners, they look like these. These are very industrial looking. So this one here on the right hand is a all-American pressure canner. These run about $400. I got mine off Craigslist. They last forever. They're really heavy duty aluminum. The one on the left is a Presto pressure canner. These are easily available at Walmart, a little bit lighter, easier to handle. But you'll notice that they have a gauge on there, so you know how many pounds of pressure are inside that canner. And there's a weighted regulator there. So these are important for low acid vegetables because it allows the inside to reach a temperature of 240 degrees. You can't reach that in an open kettle, an open system. It has to be under pressure to reach 240. The highest temperature you can reach on a boiling water bath canner is 212. So that's not enough to kill botulism spores. You have to get it up to 240 degrees to kill the botulism spores. And it's a big difference between the pressure cooker and pressure canner. And a lot of people get confused with the two. Okay. And if you have any questions, please feel free to write me. I cover food preserving in my column as well, so I'll throw in food preserving questions all the time. Okay, pickling and fermenting. So this is going to be a high acid environment. So lots of fun. Vinegar, you use vinegar to produce a high acid environment. And the high acid environment will reduce it. I mean, it doesn't eliminate all bacteria, but it does keep the bacteria count down. And it preserves vegetables just by putting it in a high acid environment. Fermenting, kind of the same thing, except there's a few extra steps. So when you ferment, say sauerkraut, you cut your cabbage up, and then what you do is you add salt, you massage the salt into the cabbage, and then you put it into a fermentation crock. So that high salt environment prevents spoilage. So the spoilage bacteria do not like a high acid or a high salt environment. But the lactobacillus, which is your friendly bacteria, it does like that high salt. So the lactobacillus will start to grow and it outcompetes the spoilage bacteria. And then lactobacillus produces lactic acid, which produces an acidic environment, which in itself is a preservative mechanism as well. So you end up with a more complex flavor profile because of the my cat is scratching himself on so my computer's rocking a little bit. The fermentation does produce a more complex flavor profile than just plain pickling. And so if you are making pickles, you'll notice there's different recipes for fermented pickles and just quick pickles that you put in vinegar. So there's a difference in flavor profile between the two, and it's worth trying both just to see the difference. Okay, so big points here for food safety and preservation. So don't try to preserve questionable food. If it's going bad, just give it to the compost pile. Don't try to preserve it. Label everything, because you think you might know what it is when you put it in the freezer, but 6 months from now you'll have no clue. I learned the hard way on that one. Use only tested or approved recipes for canning. Avoid Pinterest, Facebook, and Rebel Canner web pages, because anything that starts out with "I haven't killed anybody yet," you probably ought not use their advice. Healthycanning.com, my go-to website, and it's really easy to remember. It's really easy to remember. They're very good about keeping current on all their recipes. Master Food Preservers, university websites and cooperative extensions, also good sources for food safety, preservation advice, and also the USDA, their guide for home Center for Home Food Preservation also has a lot of good advice for dealing with food safety, including things like how long to keep leftovers and things like that. Also, a lot of information on the USDA website. They have recalls and things like that. They have links to that. And once again, all of these websites are like rabbit warrens. You get in there and you will be, you can be sucked in there. There's a whole bunch of information. And the thing is, these websites have actually true information as opposed to, Pinterest or whatever. So I think that was my last slide. Yeah, it is.
I think
Okay.
so, Laura. Thank
So
you
I hope
so
I didn't
much.
confuse everybody too much, but yeah.
I don't think so. And they have some questions for you in case they were
Awesome.
confused. Are you up for it?
Yeah, sure.
Let's start off with a gardening question from Becky, who wants to know what's a good time to trim that rosemary you were talking so much about?
Pretty much any time. I trim it whenever I need rosemary. But for a lot of plants, I like trimming perennials and stuff like probably December. Like, do it after Christmas when you're looking for something to do.
A
I
week
mean,
between Christmas and New Year's, you can be trimming away.
yeah, I mean like roses too. I mean, here it's like you know in Montana or something, everything's covered with 10 feet of snow, so you have to get out there and prune your stuff before it gets covered in snow. But here it's kind of like, oh, what the hell. So we're real lackadaisical here in California. You can prune your perennials anytime.
Any
And
old time
this
you
would
want
be
to.
best. Yeah.
Well, we've got
Yeah.
another question. What about garlic or shallot infused olive oil sold for FODMAP diets, those diets for people with intestinal issues? Are they treated so they can stay on the shelf or stored for extended periods of time? Do you know anything about that?
No. I would go with like a commercially made product, because they're the industrial processes are much higher temperature. I mean, you'll see garlic in these jars, like
Sure.
I'd help you if you drop one of those things. But you'll see the garlic in the jars, like a Costco or whatever. And those are safe to use, but they're usually treated with acidifying agents, and they're processed at a very high temperature. So it's something that's not available to a home preserver. So if you do want to do that, I would look for something that's industrial process, or if you make your own, like I said, put it in the refrigerator and make small batches, use it within like 2 weeks max.
Rather
Yeah.
than letting it sit around. That makes total sense.
Yeah, and not at room temperature either. Yeah.
Diane wants to know, she says, I planted tomatoes, cucumbers, and strawberries. They were eaten before they could ripen, and it wasn't by us. How to keep, we were just
Yes.
talking about this before we got on, how to keep those animals from eating the produce, and what kind of fertilizer to use on edible plants.
Let's see. Okay, so with the rats things, we've been using snap traps, and we've been overrun with rats this year, and they'll eat the fruit on the tree. Like if you have citrus and it's hollowed out, that's a rat. They do that. We lost all of our fava beans due to rats. We've lost like a large amount of our tomatoes due to rats. It's just, it's an ongoing, the struggle is real. So I like using the electrocution traps or the snap traps. I really hate using poisons because of the spillover effect.
For the environment. Yeah.
Yeah. And then it's also more satisfying to find a dead rat in the trap. I mean,
I got him.
Yes.
Vanquish the enemy.
Because after a while, you just like, I want to see a dead body, okay? That's like the rat zapper until you shake it out. It's like, ah. So
what about to the question of fertilizer?
fertilizer, you know, pretty much, gosh, say Miracle Grow, pretty much like any all-purpose fertilizer is good.
So that's safe. We don't have to worry about safety for those.
Well, you do, but you know, like say 1616, I wouldn't recommend using it on your vegetables because of the danger of it burning. So I like, you know, when you harvest your vegetables and you pull out the tomato plants and stuff, put in compost, add compost back into the soil and dig it in, because all those microorganisms will help. It helps the plant, but also makes nutrients more available to the plant. So it's a really, I love compost for that reason. Also, like worm castings are good as well. But we use Miracle Grow.
Okay, your secret's safe with us.
I would say fish
25
emulsion, but I think that would bring the rats in a little bit.
Fair enough.
And fish emulsion's good, but yeah.
Christina Torres has a question for you. She says, I've frozen excess fruit many times, but have never used fresh fruit. Overall, I haven't had issues with fruit appearance or flavors. I use them mostly for smoothies or baking cakes or muffins. Although sometimes I just eat them straight frozen as snacks like bananas and blueberries. Would dipping the fruit briefly in lemon juice serve the same purpose as fruit fresh?
Yeah.
Okay.
Lemon juice isn't quite as effective, but yeah. And especially if you're, you know, for discoloration purposes, you know, if you work fast, which I don't, so if you work fast and get it in the freezer, then usually it'll keep its color reasonably well. But,
just a couple more questions and then we can
yeah.
wrap up for today. Thank you, Laura.
Oh, yeah.
Philippe wants to know, it says a pressure cooker can reach 250 degrees Fahrenheit. So why can't it be used for canning?
Okay, good question. So when you have a pressure canner, what you have to do is when you put it has a rack, and you put the jars on the rack, because if you don't, the bottoms will break out. Then you put the lid on and you turn the heat on. Well, you put about this much water in, right? You turn it on and you have to let it vent for 10 minutes. So that's one thing that a pressure cooker usually doesn't go through that venting process. The venting is to make sure that the atmosphere, all of the atmosphere, every square inch of that inside that pressure canner is steam, and that there's not air, it's all steam. So that's one thing. Another thing is that it has to be kept at a certain pressure for a certain amount of time. So it's very precise where, like, okay, so once it's vented, then you put a weighted regulator on that stem, and the regulator will make sure that that pressure inside of there is at 10 pounds, either 5, 10, or 15 pounds. And you go by, you know, where you are and if you're at sea level, it's going to be a different pressure than if you're up in Big Bear.
An altitude, right?
Right, and that's why you use the recipes that are tested, because it tells you, okay, if you're at 1,000 feet, you have to use 10 pounds of pressure. So there's a pressure regulator, and you put that on there, the weighted regulator, and when it starts to jiggle, that means that it's reached that pressure, 10 pounds or whatever. For me, it's usually 10 pounds. And you let it jiggle, and it has to jiggle like every few seconds. It's going to jiggle. And you'll notice the dial, it'll stay at 10 pounds.
Every 10 pounds.
So you don't really have that with a pressure cooker. So it has to be at that pressure for, 40 minutes, 30 minutes, an hour and a half, depending on what you're canning, because that's what it was tested for, in order to kill any botulism spores.
Very important.
Yeah, so that's the thing. There's a couple of extra features in a pressure canner that you don't have with a pressure cooker. Yeah.
Makes sense. One last
Yeah.
question and then we'll let you go. Mike wants to know, what's the best method to preserve and store eggplant? That is a great question. I love eggplant.
Okay, eggplant is tricky. What I like to do, because it really doesn't dry very well, right?
Mhm.
And what I like to do, there's a recipe for pasta puttanesca that uses eggplant, like cubed eggplant with I think olives and capers and tomatoes, and that recipe, it's from Ball. You can find it on Healthy Canning. Healthy
Okay.
Canning has an index, like you can go in there and put in an ingredient and there's search, and then it will tell you
And tell
all
you
the
what.
recipes that use that ingredient. There are a few for eggplant. I think caponata is another one that you can use.
Delicious.
So yeah, but the pasta puttanesca sauce is really good with that. But for the most part, eggplants, we try to eat them. We try to eat them as they come up, because yeah, there's only so much
Yeah.
pasta puttanesca we can have. So yeah.
Sounds perfect. Well, listen, Laura, thank you. That's all the time we have for today, folks.
All
Again,
right.
your information is always so amazing. Join us again next month, everybody, for Garden Party. Meanwhile, join us for our upcoming virtual programs. On Friday at 5, we have Bookish with well-known authors. And next week, join us for our new virtual program, Right Size Your Life and Live Well Now, with our home organizing expert and syndicated columnist, Marnie Jameson. You can register for all of our upcoming programs and catch up on the ones you've missed by going to scng.com/virtual events. If you'd like to share your thoughts from today, or if you have additional questions, please email us at events@scng.com. Also, I put Laura's columns in the chat. I hope you guys saw that.
Oh
And
yeah, please ask the questions to the
yeah,
column. I would be
please
informative.
ask her directly if you need to.
Yes.
And also a final reminder, everybody, if you're not a subscriber, please give us a call at 877-469-6133. Become a stakeholder in local journalism and support programs like these. You are the ones who make this possible. So thank you. Thank you again for your support, and we hope to see you next time. Take care.
Right.
Happy canning.